Have you ever stopped to think about the mindset from which movies are created, or about why we like watching old Disney movies like Sleeping Beauty or Tangled? I mean, we've grown up surrounded by these stories, but we've never stopped to consider why they carry such a great appeal, or why media is so set on love conquering all and characters achieving love's true kiss. I propose that we take a look into this history so that we can understand how these concepts of love are shifting from economic propositions to love matches and found families. There's a reason why contemporary Disney movies are more compelling. So let's get a bit of context. As modern viewers to these stories, we've basically been conditioned to expect a happy ending that either takes the form of true love's kiss or the family being reunited. This understanding hasn't always been universal, though. In her book, Marriage, a History, How Love Conquered Marriage, Stephanie Coontz traces the historical context of marriage and how this understanding has shifted as love took center stage and then surpassed practicality. Prior to this shift into modernity, marriage wasn't, quote, primarily about the individual needs and desires of a man and woman. It had to do with getting good in-laws and increasing one's family labor force, end quote. Rather than a cultural obsession with romance, quote, love was primarily a question of family allegiances and controlled reproduction, end quote. Practicality trumped love and politics passion. Beginning with the 18th century and throughout the 1950s, though, Coontz explains that two major shifts are taking place, stating that love then becomes the main reason for marriage and that gender roles between males and females become really, really prominent. Essentially, young people are advocating for love and companionship to be at the center of marriage rather than economic or social gain being the driving force, shifting the focus from task-oriented workmates to feelings-oriented soulmates. Rather than giving women more freedoms, however, this shift further placed women on a moral pedestal centered around domesticity, while the men became the breadwinners. This focus on domesticity is shown in many of the Disney movies released in the 1950s, including Cinderella in 1950 and Sleeping Beauty in 1959. These female characters perform domestic tasks until they meet a man who essentially seems to solve all of their problems. Although the romantic aspect of these films may be compelling, the female characters lack any education outside of the home or in marriageable accomplishments. As Mary Wollstonecraft explains in A Vindication of the Rights of Women, this is inherently problematic. Wollstonecraft is clear that, quote, the woman who strengthens her body and exercises her mind will, by managing her family and practicing various virtues, become the friend and not the humble dependent of her husband, end quote. This statement critiques the theory of gender difference in which, quote, there is a need for the social construction of roles and identities linked to the biological construction of masculinity and femininity, end quote. Although men and women differ biologically, one isn't inherently less than the other. To specifically relate this back to the movies we've been watching, classic Disney movies were produced when marriages had basically completely shifted from being practical alliances toward that concept of the love match. From the perspective of film, romances, quote, shape our expectations of what love will be like, expectations by which we will want to abide, leading us to shoehorn our feelings into that idealized form, end quote. As our culture shifts away from the gendered perspective of the original love match, love-based relationships in films have also shifted. Essentially, familial love has become incredibly important. Although we love the relationship between Rapunzel and Flynn Rider, reconnecting with her family is actually the true resolution to the movie. Rather than, quote, a never-ending barrage of shining armor and white wedding gowns, climatic kisses, and happily ever after heterosexuality, end quote, modern love is far more complex. Love will not save us, nor will family always be there. The world is far more complex than that.